Yo, what's good? Welcome back to Groove Selective. If you've ever wondered how to get those kicks absolutely slamming in hard techno, today I'm going to show you exactly how. Not only that, we're going to be remaking My Gasoline by Maddix and Basswell. So let's jump straight into this project, and today we're not going to start off with the sound design, but we're going to start off with the kick drums. Now these kicks were designed in Serum 2, however I've already printed them out as WAVs, and we're using 3 different kick drums from the pack. Now we're using kick 1, kick 16 and kick 2. Kick 1 and 16 is for more of the low end and the rumble, and then kick 2 is going to be our top layer for that attack and that additional bit of punch. Now if I go into kicks here, and we can preview kick 1, and then we're going to preview kick 16, and then we're going to preview kick 2. So we can hear those different sounds and how we could actually potentially look at layering those up to create a different sounding kick. Now if I zoom in here, you'll notice I've got the full kick for kick 1, but I've only got the tail of kick 16. Now both of those together sound a little bit like this. And then we're going to add kick 2 over the top of it, and it should sound a little bit like this. And once you've layered those up and popped those into your quick sampler, we can have it landing on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, and make sure to max out the velocity, and it will sound a little bit like this. We've got this industrial lead, which sounds a little bit like this. And we're going to load up Serum 2. Now you can find this league in the Groove Selective Warehouse Techno Volume 1 pack, and you're going to have access to a massive variation of sounds for Warehouse Techno. You're going to start off on oscillator A, and you're going to be using basic shapes. And then you're going to select wavetable position 2, and you're going to turn your unison up to 16. Then moving down to our warp, you're going to select Alt Warp and then PWM, and you're going to turn this up to 73%. And for your detune, you can move this up to around 0.6, and for your blend, move up to around 75%. And that's going to net us that really aggressive sound that we're looking for. Then moving on to oscillator B, we're using basic shapes again, and you're going to change your wavetable position to position 2, and then you're going to set your unison to 16. Your detune and blend is going to be the exact same as oscillator A. And then we're going to move on to the noise. We're using AC Hum 1, and you're going to set the level all the way down because that's going to be controlled by one of our LFOs later on. And you can keep that filter off because we want the sound to be super aggressive. For envelope 1, you're going to copy our ADSR settings here. So your attack is set to 1.5 milliseconds, your hold is set to 0, your decay 811 milliseconds, your sustain minus 19 dB, and your release time 75 milliseconds. And then we're going to move on to LFO 1. Now LFO 1 is controlling the detune on both oscillator A and oscillator B. Now you can do this just by dragging your LFO onto the detune modules on both oscillators. Once you've done that, you're going to set the range to around 15%, and you can do this on both oscillators. You can see this one is set to 14% currently. And then for LFO 1, make sure your rate is set to quarter note, and you can replicate our LFO shape just here. Now for LFO 2, this is where things get a little bit wacky. This is set to our coarse pitch on both oscillators, and then it's also set to the level of our noise. Now you can follow the same process again. You're going to set the rate to half note. You're going to copy our LFO shape here. So if you go over to your coarse pitch, your range should be around 19%, and this should be on both oscillators. And for your level, it should move to around halfway. And next we're going to move on to the effects. Now we're using the dimension module here, and the size is set to around 50%, and the mix level is set to around 20 to 25%. Then we're using 2 distortions, and this is what makes our sound really aggressive. We're using diode 1, and the drive is set to around 45%, and the mix is at 100%. And then we're using linear fold, and the drive is set to around 35%, and the mix is set to around 70%. Then we're using a phaser. You can turn the mix all the way up to 100%. And copy our settings here. And then we're using a reverb, and that's so we have a nice tail to the aggressive lead. We're using the Hall model, and you can set your mix to around 35%. And then we're using an EQ, and this is to cut out all of that low end. We're also boosting a little bit of that lower mid-range and upper mid-range, and that is just to add to the aggression of the sound. And then we're using a multi-band compressor, and that is just to control some of the dynamics of our sound. And for this lead, it plays once every 2 bars, and you're going to be playing the F sharp, and it's going to be starting between beat 2 and beat 3. In context, it sounds a little bit like this. And And then we get to add our hi-hats. Now, for our hi-hats here, I used Open Hat 7, Open Hat 3, and Open Hat 1 from our pack. So if I go into our pack here, we go into Warehouse Techno Volume 1, Open Hats, and I'm using Open Hat 7, Open Hat 3, and Open Hat 1. And if I double click this region here, we can see they're all performing on the offbeat. However, I'm accenting some of those notes. So we can see on the first offbeat, we've got a little accent using Open Hat 3, and I've set the velocity level to 76. And then the velocity levels for the rest of the hats is at 25, 34, and then 26. And it should sound a bit like this. And then we move on to the second half, and this is where we add like a 16th note pattern, but we take out beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. So we can see here, I've still got that accent happening. I've got one additional hi-hat performing on beat 1 using Open Hat 7. But if we move over to Open Hat 1 here, it's playing 16th notes. However, we've taken out beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. And then we've just changed around these velocities just a little bit to humanize it and not make it sound too robotic. And it should sound a little bit like this. And that's pretty much it for the drop. We add that vocal in and we're pretty much there. So let's take a look at this build up. Now it's fairly straightforward. We're using clap 1 and it's landing on the 2 and the 4. Let's load up our step sequencer here. We can see we're landing on beat 2 and then beat 4. I've kept this really dry in the mix. In fact, I've taken out some of the top end using our EQ here. And then we're looking at our snare. Our snare is performing 16th notes. And the only thing I've altered is the swing. So if I load up my swing function here, I've turned it up to 55%. Now you can do this in a variation of ways. If I convert this to a MIDI file quickly, and then I select all my MIDI data, we can turn the swing up to 55 here, and we'll have the exact same result. I haven't actually changed any of the velocities in this instance, but what I have done is I've added an EQ, and we've cut out all the top end, and we're going to automate that high end coming in so we can build up that energy and that tension in the track. So if I look here, we're starting at 352 Hertz and moving it all the way up to 2000. And then we're going to add in these hi-hats. And we are playing 16th notes on Open Hat 1, and you can see these velocity changes that I've made here. And then we also got Open Hat 3 to accent the offbeat. And then we can add some effects. So we've got 3 risers that I'm using here, all from the Groove Selective Warehouse Techno Volume 1 pack. Again, if you want to find where those are, you just go into the pack, you go down to effects, and then you can find those here. So we've got riser 2 here, riser 5 here, and riser 4. And the build up should cut 1 bar before the drop comes in. There's only one more layer to our build up here, and that is the respace. So if I load this respace up here, so we're starting on F sharp and we're moving up to G, and that's at the end of each phrase. So if you've got beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, and then beat 1, beat 2, beat 3. For beat 4 on bar 2, that is when it moves up to G, and then it goes back down to the F sharp. In context, it sounds a little bit like this. Much like the other sounds that you hear today, you can find this in the Groove Selective Warehouse Techno Volume 1 pack just here. Whilst this is quite a simple respace sound, the main thing that's keeping it interesting with that really basic melody is the glide between the F sharp and the G in the upper octave. So if you go down to your portamento and you've got another respace sound, or you're using this one, make sure it's turned on and then set your milliseconds to around 135. Now you can play around with that to taste. That's what I found to be as accurate as possible when I was doing the remake. And everything all together should sound a little bit like this.
Ecstasy, my limousine. Ketamine, my teenage dream. And LSD, my sweet 16.
tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, please do like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out the sample packs down below. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll hopefully see you next time.